So I think Honorable Kimani Chuma asked me a very direct question, which is basically about widening the tax base. I think we need to make a conscious choice, which is that if you decided that we can subsidize farmers as taxpayers, and then they have a bumper harvest, and decide for whatever reason politically that they should not pay tax, then you know what you've done is you've shrunk the tax base in terms of the number of people who are then eligible to pay income tax. So you then decide that you should be conscious that the decision you're making is that you're going to pay that money back to consumption taxes, and that's fine. But at least what you then know is that this is what we've traded off. Subsidized farmers, especially large farmers, because large farmers are the ones who actually have surpluses to sell, and then government gives them a guaranteed return. So you subsidize them, you're giving them a guaranteed return. It means you're redistributing income from lower people to people, large farmers in Kenya. If that is the decision you're making, then it's fine. But you be conscious that you're redistributing income from smaller people to large industrial farmers. If that's the choice, that's okay. But let's be, admit it upfront. The second question that you asked me was about the housing development levy. The economics of housing is this. Modern houses are actually capital intensive. They're not labor intensive. What you're asking me is this. At the Institute of Economic Affairs, our analysis of the memorandum that was issued together with this and some of the information that has been issued, that is not the best way to spend public money. So I'll give you an alternative. The alternative that we've done some very hard thinking about it at the Institute of Economic Affairs is, if you scrap the levy fund, well, you get to keep more money perhaps, but if you scrap the housing levy fund, this is what you could do for the same amount of money. Kenya has 40,000 schools. The number of children in schools in the next 11 years is going to double. Today, 15 million children wake up and go to public school. What that means is that there's a serious shortage in school infrastructure in Kenya, which the government of Kenya does well. Whatever we might talk about the quality of education, the government of Kenya historically has done a pretty decent job educating children, creating quite some. So already the Ministry of Education is struggling to actually keep school infrastructure to match the number of children going to schools. So if Parliament chooses to have a school infrastructure development plan and then fund it every year with this amount of money, you actually cover a greater part of the Republic, and you actually do much, much more for the Republic than housing plan, which is 250,000 people. We have 14 million houses. Those houses will definitely go because they're very heavily subsidized, but you're actually, again, redistributing income from low-income people to people who can own condominiums and studios. I don't think that is equitable distribution of cash. So maybe that's an idea you can consider. I'll come to the third question.
Kwame, on the assumption that the housing fund is what is being used to build the houses, because what you're proposing then is use the fund to now expend it on public school infrastructure.
Yes,
which is actually not the case. Maybe probably, if you don't know, no, the housing fund levy is not being used to construct houses.
No, but the rationale then that means that actually the housing fund is being sold to Kenyans with some misconception, because the idea is if it's the offtake.
We've heard that from the golf courses as a control state. People have all kinds of perceptions and misconceptions.
Yeah. Yes, but if you speak about it as a housing levy, and the way we sell it to our colleagues at the Institute of Economic Affairs is, this is your contribution, there's a possibility that you might find the fund. Yeah. I mean, you might find a house. That's the claim that people have. But anyway, regardless of it, if you place personal houses on one side and public schooling on the other, every day public schooling provides greater public value. It's even good for social cohesion, and the cost effectiveness is superior to what you would get from constructing 250,000 houses per year. But let's leave that. Let me go to the third question, coming from Hassan. He asked about where does a default take us to. He's not here, but look, we are Kenyans and we are taxpayers. A default would probably be extremely damaging to everybody. Nobody benefits from a default. Nobody. I don't think anybody benefits from a default at all. So obviously it's a tough thing. But what we suggest for the government of Kenya to say, let Kenyans actually understand the risks. I think the way it's been sold to Kenyans about the payment of the public debt is as if we should be made to be scared. That, look, If you're not too careful and you continue to ask us questions, there'll be a default and you lose your pensions and all this and all that stuff. I think to ensure that, because there's going to be pain regardless, an adult conversation about what the options the government is choosing is the superior alternative. We hope it doesn't come, because we know that even after next year's big ticket payments of the Eurobond, subsequent years will have very significant payments still required. So we think that this burden is one thing. Part of sharing the burden is to treat people with respect, right? Citizens, let's have a conversation around this question in that way. So there are no shortcuts, we agree, but perhaps the tone of the conversation could actually be more conversational as opposed to lecturing people. Then, Honorable Kazanzo.
Do you think the Kenyan side, Kwame, sorry to interrupt, would borrow from the Korean example, what you heard from other, where ordinary Koreans were able to say, okay, we're going to pay a public debt, and they contributed over 27 billion. Do you see that happening in this country? Further taxation.
I think that's a good example, but the truth is, Kenyans are still even struggling to buy food. So asking them to contribute to a government public sector kitty to pay for that, and they're paying through taxes. So I think the respect is you pay through taxes. These are difficult times. It doesn't matter whose fault it is, by the way, whether it's the administration, the incumbents, or their predecessors. The point is, we're all here together as Kenyans. We cannot eject from citizenship. Let's all try and hold this thing together. I think that's the point. What could be done at this moment is this. There are 14 million households in Kenya. As we demonstrated, for the lowest 20% of households, their income over the last 1 year has shrunk by 30% relative to the prices of food. Those people need help. So if government wanted to extend help to them by expanding the food subsidy, and it can be distributed very easily through mobile money transfers, this was done. And this is a temporary measure. It is not a permanent one. So your concern about its sustainability is valid. But we could do this for 1 year until we see what happens. It is cheap, 8 billion shillings a month. That is 1 day's collection of revenues based on today's estimates. So that's one thing to consider. It's immediate, it will be extremely helpful, and it will even calm people quite a bit, showing government is here working together with us. Now, the 3 mistakes that you mentioned, Honorable, these are not, but these are the ones that we at the IE have tracked. There is no doubt anymore that the SGR and the cost at which it was executed was a monumental mistake. I'll give you an example. The entire revenue that has been generated from the SGR for 6 years is 72 billion. That is not even enough to pay the principal payments that were required. So obviously that's a sinking fund. I think it would have to be treated very, very differently. So that's one. More recently, you see, the food problem in Kenya, I think, is improperly analyzed. The problem with food's availability and food security and cost of living is not that there's no supply, sometimes supply is short, but that households at a certain income level, even if the food was available in the market, their income is, so it's an income problem. The conversation we've gone with so far is to subsidize farmers. And it tends to be big farmers who are the ones who got the fertilizer and got the seed. And so they have big stores. But if somebody in a certain market say, if this was a Bomas village and their income has not grown for 5 years, that supply does not help. That was another mistake. Then government starts to trade cooking oil. All that money, and we are not questioning the intent, we are questioning the design of these policies. It was improperly designed. The way to do that is actually to support households to be able to consume during a shock such as the one that we saw. But most of the support that government has given are to traders, but more specifically to the supply side. So we might have food stores with 67 million bags of grain, right? But we might not have enough. People might still suffer because they do not have enough money to buy the several kilograms that they need per month. That conversation needs to be reframed. It is a demand side problem, not necessarily a supply side problem anymore. So that was a mistake. The final one is basically the debts. And I think the control of budget has mentioned this, the Office of the Control of Budget has. Look, you cannot run a deficit of 6 to 7% per year, regardless of where you were, for 10 consecutive years, as we did in the last administration, not expect to have a problem. It was a matter of when, not if. So I think that Parliament needs to be a little bit more conscious about Treasury selling to you that infrastructure solves all problems. It doesn't. As we can tell, we built a lot of infrastructure, stadiums and all those other things. It's not paying for the debt now. They're still going back to the citizens and getting that money to pay for them. Parliament needs a serious conversation with itself about whether you performed your oversight functions well. And my judgment, with due respect, gentlemen and ladies, is you did extremely poorly.
Thank you.
You must own this problem as well.
Thank you. You hear that, Kimani?
Your Excellency, I hear that, but Kwame will agree with me that within those 10 years we are dealing with a very tyrannical regime, and the control of budgets will bear me witness. You know what you have to go through.
On a lighter note, I know, just a minute, Eugene.
Yes.
Just as Kimani likes to stretch us backwards, I can tell you for a fact, part of the reason we are sitting here today is because of the integrity issues that the control of the budget spoke about. Even as presently constituted, Kimani's parliament and Wandai's parliament is under capture, state capture. So you shouldn't expect much from them. And this is why we have to really go deep into these things. Even as we are sitting here, I said this is not even for you. My good friend, Speaker Wetangula, goes out there to dismantle Azimio coalition, where speakers ruling integrity issues, because he wants to use the 21 members of Jubilee, all right, to be able to carry on to make sure that Kimani's taxes are sustained. Sorry, Kimani.
Your Excellency, you definitely know I take great exception to discussing the Speaker of the National Assembly in this forum, and especially on a matter completely unrelated to the economic issues that we are dealing with. Matters that of grave concern to the people of Kenya. And with all due respect to myself and Noble Pio and I who sit here, we must give credit to at least the 13th Assembly that we have been bold enough to deal with some of these issues touching on the economy. And I believe history will judge the 13th Assembly different from other assemblies, but also to say, without giving excuse to Parliament, I think is more of a leadership issue than the institution of Parliament. It is about leaders who appreciate the role of institutions, that the controller of budgets is an institution, not the person of Mary Nyakanga, that Parliament is an institution, not the persons who sit in Parliament, and respect those institutions, that they have a role to play in budget making, in helping the government and the executive to deal with matters to do with the economy. Therefore, when the controller of budget tells you that paying Telcom, looting 6 billion shillings 2 days to a general election is not right, don't put a gun over her head. Respect that office of the controller of budget. When Parliament, Your Excellency, because I have sat as a chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, I can tell you things that some of us had to go through because we put our foot down. Masinda is here, he will tell you.
To continue putting your foot down.
And I will assure you, Your Excellency, Parliament as a leader of majority, I will make sure even this government under William Ruto will have to abide by the Constitution and respect institutions. Therefore, let us not have a blanket condemnation of Parliament. I know we have had this debate for the last 7 years with Kwame on the role of Parliament.
Can I finish in a minute?
Co-chairs. I think I took the floor from you.
No, co-chairs, I was just proposing we go by only proposal. That they finish, then we do a second round, because we have a second round.
Okay. And so the final point, which is basically what you asked for. Honorable Wandai asked, you did not ask me this, but please allow me to just answer. Which specific expenditures do you want to see GOK reduce?
Yes.
So we will tell you. In the year 2019, the Institute of Economic Affairs was concerned about how much fuel government was buying. So we went through all the parliamentary estimates, and went line by line through every purchase of fuel by the public sector, keeping aside the military and the police. And the figure that we found suggested to us that the government of Kenya was buying 150,000 liters of diesel per day from the numbers that Parliament approved for expenditure. That cannot be right. Where are all these vehicles going to? Either that, or government vehicles are pumped with fuel and they just ride around. It was an enormous number. And then we also checked telecommunications. So we checked what telecommunications are, and we find out that certain departments in the public sector have a telecommunications bill of 20,000 shillings per person per month. 20,000 shillings per person per month. Per person. So it's not basically for a whole office of 30 people. That's a lot of money. So what I'm trying to suggest here is, if Parliament took its work diligently and went line by line through items, asking, why are we buying this quantity of things, which is what you expected by the Constitution to do, you would find a lot of space for savings without having to have an abrupt cut in any budget, because you save a lot of money which could be directed to the more important things that we spoke about. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now,
We can now hear the person who guides Parliament in making